Well, hello and good morning to everybody. This is Dr. Raphael Kelvin speaking, and I'm very pleased to welcome you into the author training webinar for MindEd Stage 3. I'm going to be hosting and speaking for the first part of this meeting, probably the next 15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues Aid and Jan van Iwaarden from eLearning for Health, who are going to talk to you a little bit more about the technical side of developing the materials that we're going to produce. I'm very pleased indeed to be hosting this training webinar for all of you lovely authors who are listening to us today. We're very excited about this program. We think it's very important. We see it as developing I'd like to conjure up a couple of images for you, developing an oasis of knowledge and understanding and information for all the people out there who are, caring for and involved in some way, professionally or personally, with children, young people with mental health difficulties and problems. And what we're doing in this part of the program in stage 3 is we're adding to the well of information that we've already created, and we're going to tell you a little bit about that. So if I can go on to the second slide, please. Yes, so just to explain, we also have Emma Palmer, who is the project manager, who is part of this presentation, and also Dr. Brian Jacobs, who is lead editor, who's overseeing content production with myself, and we also have some technical team here. Okay, so in terms of the first part of this presentation, what we'd like to do is tell you a little bit about where we've been and what we've done so far in the MindEd portal and the MindEd program. We'd like to tell you a bit about why we've done this and the vision, if you like, behind the whole portal. And then we'd like to tell you where we're going, which is stage 3, which is the part that yourselves as parent and professional authors are now about to create or in the process of creating, and then go on to tell you how we're going to create that material. And at that point I'll pass on to Aid and Jan. Okay, next slide please. So what have we done so far? So the MindEd portal, which I hope you've all looked at or will be looking at, consists of 300 or so bite-sized sessions of information and e-learning which we've created already. This is very high quality material, we believe, and that's what we've been told, and it's material that was created over the last 2 years by a consortium, by a grouping of professional bodies and organizations who are involved in the care and the training of people who are involved in the care of young people with mental health problems. To tell you a bit about this consortium, it includes the Royal College of Psychiatrists and the College of GPs, the College of Nursing and the College of Pediatrics and Child Health and so forth. And the authors and the material that we've created has come in a sense from the foundations that this consortium approach has provided us with. The material that we provided in the first part of the portal wasn't aimed specifically at parents. We like to do everything for everybody, but actually the funding that we received and the scope that we had means that we had to make choices, and we will continue to have to make choices. So the first part of the funding was aimed at people with a responsibility for children or young people, be that people who do that in specialist services, people like myself who work in the NHS, but also anybody working out in the general public arena, so people like teachers and youth workers, people working in church organisations and voluntary organisations and so forth. Anything up to about 1 million people, we think, were in scope for the first part of the portal. And the vision for the portal is to bring child mental health out of the shadows. Mental health itself has probably been in the shadows and underdeveloped and not providing everything that everybody would like it to for adults with mental health problems. Children's mental health has been in the shadow of that too. And I think those of you who are parent authors have spoken with a lot of passion about the struggles that you've all had in relation to your children's well-being and their mental health. And as professionals, we're acutely aware that services and structures need to be developed and need to be bolstered and strengthened. So MindEd is an essential part and a big component of a sort of wave of work that's happening across the country in terms of improving outcomes for children and young people's mental health. And the part that we see MindEd as playing is improving knowledge and improving understanding about these issues across the population. So we have a very broad scope. We're not just talking about those people who are involved or in part of mental health services, but also people who may never come in contact with mental health services but need to know and need to be able to help children and young people at the earliest opportunity. Because we believe and we think that if we can intervene with good knowledge and good information, we can decrease stigma and we can improve the outcomes and decrease the chances of young people going on to have continuing mental health problems that show in adult life. So one figure that's quite striking in relation to this is that approximately 3/4 of all adult mental health problems can be first detected in children and young people, and it's something that people who are not familiar with the field are always surprised about. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we produced already, there's a wealth of information. On this slide, I'm not expecting you to look at all the information or look at all the detail, but it's essentially just highlighting the breadth of information that we've already put into the portal. And inside the portal, there's information which is relevant to anybody, right through to information which is relevant for anybody, but is focused on more specialist staff and specialist folk who'll be looking at the site. The range of people that the portal for stages 1 and 2, so that's the stuff that already exists, was pointed at and aimed at, is listed on this slide for you, and you can see that there are people such as myself who are child psychiatrists, but also GPs, paediatricians, youth counsellors, speech therapists, faith workers, volunteers, early years workers. There's a raft of people who have a responsibility and work with children and young people. And we believe that everybody should have some knowledge, just as they would have knowledge about what to do if a young person who was in their care fell over and bumped themselves. They would have some first aid skills. We believe they should have skills and knowledge about child mental health and what to do if somebody metaphorically bumps themselves emotionally or from a behavioural point of view. So that was stage 1 and 2, and those stages have been completed. The information and the e-learning is on the portal and it's there for everybody to access. We were successful in gaining funding for stage 3, which is what we're now creating and what this training is in relation to. And we obtained just over £500,000 from a competitive grant that we put into the Department for Education. Which we're very grateful for. And this material was to expand the portal and expand the scope to aim it directly at parents and carers. We're very aware, as we've written the material for part 1 and part 2, that it's relevant and appropriate for parents and carers, but necessarily it wasn't written entirely with a parent and carer focus in our thinking. That was beyond the scope of what we could do. But now that we're talking about parents and carers, it's important to understand that there are many, many parents and carers in the country, and I'm sure everybody will have figured this, but if there are 13 million children, which there are in the country, there are probably 20 million adults who have some kind of care, parental or step-parent care and so forth, responsibility for those children. So we're now aiming for 21 million people, not just a million people, and so our scope is very large and very extensive. In terms of what we're going to create, we've had focus groups and we've undertaken surveys and so forth to gather in the best information that we could find, the best knowledge that we could find about what it is that parents would like to have added onto the portal or in addition on the portal. And this slide and the next slide, if we can just go forward to the next slide. These two slides are really kind of giving you a brief kind of overview of the fact that what we're creating is going to be 35 sessions in total, which are going to sit inside, alongside the portal that we've already created, and they need to interdigitate. They need to link in and point to and be in relation to information that we've already got created. So we want to make sure that when we're writing the sessions, the new 35 sessions, if we could go back a slide, please. So these are examples of the sessions. We're thinking about how we can point to existing material, and in this way what we do is we maximize the impact of all the knowledge and information that we've got on the portal. So there are 35 sessions. They're divided into two parts in a sense. There are 10 sessions which are fairly brief sessions. Those are sessions called Simple Introductory Guidance and Signposting to Existing Content. And then there are 25 sessions which are a bit longer. The 10 sessions which are shorter are basically intros. They're kind of gateways into the portal and into further information. The 25 more substantial sessions are, if you like, significantly additional material to the portal. Okay, if we can go forward and to the next slide. I want to refer you to the author guide, which you will have received in the last couple of days. So written by Emma Palmer, who is the project manager who's on this call as part of the team and colleagues. Please do refer to the author guide throughout your process of developing material, because it does have all the information in that I'm referring to and that we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so a few little guidance notes in terms of the sessions and how long material can be and so forth. So in terms of the simple introductory sessions, so these are the shorter sessions, the 10, they need to work up to being sessions that will last about 5 minutes when somebody actually reads it and works through it when it's completed. We have worked inside these parameters because, again, this is what parents have told us, leading very busy lives, and when they have children who sometimes have issues, there'll be parents who have more or greater issues as they come to our side. They want things fairly quickly and fairly easy to digest and access. So for the short sessions, 5 minutes is the maximum that we are setting, and that works inside the funding and the cost boundaries that we also have. So in terms of content, that's about 800 words, which if you were writing that as a kind of essay, if you like, you would be taking up around about 1.5 pages or 2 pages of written text. So it's not a lot in a sense, but if we're focused, we can get a lot of information into that, and we'll come on to that later. In terms of the other 25 sessions, so these are the new e-learning sessions, they have around about 1,500, maybe 2,000 words of content. That's the maximum. That will work up once we've completed the e-learning development into about 15 or 20 minutes of material. We think, and we've heard from the feedback, that audio-visual material is something that's popular when people go onto websites and gather information like this, and we've listened to that, and we've allocated a significant amount of the funding that we've got to create these materials. So we should be able to create quite a good amount of materials, but again, within limitations. Not everybody is going to have all the materials they would want, but a lot of people can have a lot of what they want. And again, these numbers and these figures, don't worry about them too much. They're all in the author guide, but just to give you a feeling for it, if you're going to take a 30-second video clip, that's about a paragraph's worth of script, about 60 words. And if that was going to be to a 2-minute video clip, typically the script would be about half a page, about 240 words. There's all sorts of different forms of audiovisual material that you could create. They could be talking heads, they could be people having a brief discussion, you could have actors creating set pieces for you that you've scripted, you could use cartoon type animation, you can have slides with a voiceover. So there's a lot of scope for creating material. And we have a professional media company called Spectracom who are going to be co-creating this with us. A little word about quality and quality assurance. I mentioned before that we pride ourselves, and the feedback that we've had is that the material that we produced is of good quality, and we think that's terribly important because that's something that we're bringing to the oasis, if you like, the oasis of good quality, quality assured material that people can trust, and we must continue to do that. That's a key principle of what we do going forward, and I'm sure all of you and everybody involved wants to do the same thing. So we must be safe, we mustn't cause any harm or upset. We need to be as close to evidence as we can be within reason. And finally, in terms of what actually gets put onto the portal and the content that we put into the portal, the clinical editorial team that I lead together with Dr. Brian Jacobs has the oversight and must have final say. Okay, next slide. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my eLearning for Health instructional design colleagues, Aid and Jen. They're experts in creating the finished product that you will see, and they're going to tell you a little bit about how they're going to support you. And I have to say, it's a delight working with people like that. I've worked on previous work creating eLearning, not in this program, where all of that sat with the author as well. And if you're not trained in how to put things onto the web and into e-learning formats, then that can be a bit of a nightmare. But Aid and Jen will tell you how you're going to use themselves and their colleagues in that process. So if I can pass over to Aid and Jen.
Thanks, Raf. Good morning, everybody. My name is Aid Shannon, and I'm the project manager for eLearning for Healthcare on this project. Just a little bit about eLearning for Healthcare. eLearning for Healthcare has been in partnership with the RCPCH on this project through all of the phases of MindEd. And eLearning for Healthcare really, as Raf said, brings the expertise in terms of taking your content and digitizing that in a format that works for learners. We've been around for nearly 10 years. We're part of Health Education England, and we work in partnership with the NHS and the professional bodies to provide e-learning content for the NHS workforce. There are around 90 plus programs, so we've worked across the full spectrum of clinical content. But this particular phase of MindEd is a very different project for us, particularly in terms of the audience. For us as an organisation, we are an online service, and we are a distributed team, so we work virtually. So it's very rare that we actually get some exposure to the end users. And as Raf's mentioned, there have been a number of workshops, and myself and a colleague were lucky enough to attend one a couple of weeks back with the parents there, some parent authors. And whilst all of the the work that we do is worthwhile and directly impacts on patient care, I have to say personally I was really struck by the stories of the parents when we were at the workshop, and it really hit home to me how important this program is, and in particular how important this particular phase is in being aimed at specifically at parents. So it was with that in mind then that we kind of came away and started about how we need to deliver this content differently. And that's really, really important because the parents have a completely different set of requirements to the usual audience that we're working for in developing e-learning content specifically for learning for clinicians. So we are still working on that as an organisation to figure out how best we take the content that you develop and digitize that in a way that really works for parents and works for their needs and requirements. We've got a really good handle on that because of all these workshops, but it is work ongoing. So you will hear more about that over the next few weeks, but I just wanted to introduce myself, introduce the organisation, and also let you know what's going on in the background whilst you start to interact with the IDs and with Jen's team on developing the content. So I'll now hand over to Jen, who'll tell you more about that process. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Jen van der Waarden and I'm the instructional designer or lead instructional designer. I have a wonderful team of designers who you can see at the bottom of my slide, who you'll all have been allocated to one of them at some point in the future. So Alice Denham, Amanda Savage and Stephen Gibbons and Wendy Lowe, you'll all learn those names and have a lot to do with them in the future. Because of the fact that we're not quite running our content as we would normally do in sessions, I'm going to stick to the first part of how you're producing your content and not necessarily take it any further at the moment. So I'm coming in at the point whereby you will have all been thinking about your session briefs, and at some point you will have them approved, that everyone's happy that work will carry on. So that's why my slide here starts at 4, because at that point what we'd like to do is to put you in contact with the ID that you will be working with so that you can have a chat about your session, that they can help you maybe with some ideas, but also as well for them to get a gauge on what the session, or if we call it information rather than session, is about. As we are not subject experts, we are the computer side of things and the learning side of things rather than the experience that you all hold. So initially, when the session brief comes to me, I will arrange that one of the IDs contacts you. I have been given some dates by Emma for when you think you can get your initial content or the first part of your content ready for. So don't worry if your dates are in November that you've given to Emma. We are aware of them, but the ID will contact you anyway, just to have be on your radar and for you to also know who they are so that you know who's emailing you. Can I just say that our IDs will find it quite difficult with a lot of authors on a session. So the main point of call for the ID will be the professional author, only because it's easier for one person, but you will always CC in the parent, or they will always CC in the parent authors, so that you could all keep talking together. Can I move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So time frames, just to make sure your IDs will talk to you about your time frames. We have other time frames as we go through, because after you've done your initial content, you'll start to work on broadening out what's important and sort of finessing what you've done. At that point, we're hoping we'll be a little bit clearer about how it's going to be displayed, and we will come back to you at that point to show you that. But please remember, your initial draft content that you give is not your final version. Okay, so it needs to have all the information, but it doesn't need to be absolutely pressed at that point. What I would suggest at the moment is that, because we are doing this project slightly differently to normal, can I suggest that your draft content actually is put at the end of your session brief, so that you only have one document that you're currently going to be working with for the time being. Remember that you identify your videos, audios, images, anything that you think might help your session. Your IDs will help you with that. Okay, they will not necessarily know exactly what you're wanting, but they perhaps can come up with ideas, and sometimes when other people come up with ideas, you might say no to them, but it might then trigger your own. How the sessions are being presented, as we know, is still under development. Okay, so normally after this point we would develop a content plan. But at this point, I'm going to say to you that the content plan, the IDs will take you through the type of content plan that we decide to do depending on how this project moves forward. So I'm not going to go into that detail too much. Stay in touch with your ID, even if it's only a hello, I'm not able to do it yet, or however, just mean, because they will stay in touch with you, and it's always worrying if for the IDs if people go silent. So even if it's a I'm really busy, can't talk to you for 2 weeks, anything like that always helps them. Can I move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so deadlines. I don't want to frighten anyone with this, but it's just to show you that we have a process once the session brief or session has initial content, shall we say, has been received. There are times where we give time for it to be developed. There are times where it will go into review and we will ask for other people's opinions. There will be times where the sub-editors look at it and review it, and all of those areas are allocated for. It's quite tight time frames, so we do ask that if you can't make those time frames, you make it sort of clear to us fairly early. The IDs will keep you in touch with how many, when their time frame has been given to them, and they will, if you can't keep to it, just come back to us so that we can let Emma know and aid that we need just a little bit more time. But we obviously, the more we slow things down, sometimes then we find that there's a stacking up process with the IDs, because obviously if all of your content comes in at once, they're only human, they can only do one at a time. But we hope to sort of achieve as much as we can as quickly as we can for you. Next. So on your top tips, I wanted to keep that fairly simple for you. Keep your content direct and simple to understand. You can always flesh it out a bit more once you've sort of realised exactly where you're going with it. So just remember to keep it simple. Remember that your content is going to be put into a downloadable leaflet that can be taken off so that it can be printed off at home for people. So in the back of your minds, if there's areas that perhaps don't need to go on that leaflet, just keep it there for later on when that leaflet is produced, so that you know what you need on the leaflet. Speak with your professional, as in try and make sure that your relationship between your professional and your parent or co-authors are fairly, you know who each other are, and you're able to talk fairly early. Use your ID well. Honestly, ask them as much as you like. If they can't answer it there and then, they'll probably come to me afterwards, but that's not a problem. We can always find out almost anything we need to. So please use as well. And your ID is your professional. So again, if you're having problems, please come to us and just say that you're not understanding something. We can always deal with that. It's not a problem. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any.
Okay, so you should, if you have any questions, please do type them into the box at the bottom, and we'll be able to respond to those.
It's Brian Jacobs. I just want to add one or two things. First of all, with regard to the numbers of words, can I please ask the authors of new substantive material to really try to restrict themselves to 1,500 words and allowing a total then of additional 500 for audiovisual material, depending on set for the sessions. The second thing is that Jen referred to the professional author being the lead author. That's correct, but there are sometimes in some sessions there's more than one professional author, and in that circumstance we should have one professional author taking the lead so that Emma knows who that person is. The third thing is that the draft content plan that you produce will be added to the bottom of the session brief. Now that's different from what we've done before, but it enables the ID to have everything in one place so that they can see the scope and the reasoning behind what they're trying to shape from the word go, which I think is actually a very good idea. And the final thing I wanted to say is that the IDs are just fantastic, and they really, if you use them well, they are a real asset to you as authors. And the final thing I wanted to say is I think the shape of what we're going to produce is actually very exciting. I think it will look different, so it won't be linear, starting at the beginning of a session and going right through. This will be branching much more than our previous material. And I think that will fit our audience and their needs and their ability, their tendency, unless they find what they want to move on very quickly to another website. I think it'll fit those needs well. Okay, I'll shut up now and we'll wait for questions.
Very specific. That's very specific.
If anyone's got any questions, then if you can't see the control bar on the right hand side, there's a little red arrow at the top right of your screen, and you can click on that, and then down the very bottom there's a little box where you can type in any questions, so please do type anything in if you've got anything you want to ask. We've got one question here, which is, do we decide the format of the video clips?
We have a significant sized pot of money. Producing video clips is one of the more expensive activities that we can do. So we'll only be able to produce a certain number of them. And I think that the way we will have to choose that is that it will have to be a process that occurs at the editor, sub-editor level, because there may be more than we can do. We will be as generous as we can, but I'm advising all authors to have a plan B with their instructional designer at the initial conversation, so what they'd ideally like, and then something that will be less expensive to produce, and talking heads with slides is probably, or talking heads alone are probably the two least expensive that we can do. But don't completely restrict yourself to only doing that, because otherwise we won't be as creative as we might be and as we're potentially able to be. So have a plan A and a plan B is my advice, and then your sub-editor will come back to you reasonably quickly to say whether you can, and that will shape the script that you write depending on exactly whether it's going to be an interactive thing between people, or whether it's just going to be somebody talking about their experience or their fears or whatever it is. I hope that's clear. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, if I can just come in on this as well. The production company, I'm not sure if you said this, Brian, they will look at scripts and they will look at what we're proposing, and they're experts in the production of material, and they'll have thoughts also to put into the pot about what's going to look good and how it would look good and whether an animation or talking head or what would be best. So there's going to be a co-creation process which will help us all work out what kind of audio-visual material we're going to produce.
So the implication of that for authors is that we will do our best first shot with you as IDs and editors, sub-editors, to select, and you will write according to that to produce the first content. But then it may be that Spectracom at a later point will come back and say, well, hey, why don't you do this in this way? Which might then mean a bit of tweaking of what you've written. The other thing to mention at this stage is that we have Dr. Anulina Kapota, who's very experienced as a child psychiatrist, but working in a training institution, King's College London, and thinking about audiovisual material, who will also help support you and then Spectracom in realizing any audio or audiovisual scripts in a way which will feel realistic at the end of the day rather than just acted. Okay? Do you want to go on to the next question?
And if I can just add something from the instructional designer's side, there is a Word document that has been done by Emma, which I know has been sent out, which actually sort of you can put down exactly what you would like. What I would say there is if you want to get your instructional designer to help you fill that document in, that's absolutely fine. They will help you. Sometimes people find it easier if someone else does a bit of the starting point and then they find it easier if they change it. Some people want to do it from scratch. So if you want their help, please ask for it.
Just to add to that, the document hasn't been sent out to all authors yet, but we expect to get that out to you next week.
Sorry, Emma.
It's all right. It's just it just gives a very brief summary of all the different types of audiovisual content you might want to think about, and some examples so that you can see what kind of thing we're talking about with each type. So hopefully you'll find that useful. Okay, we've had another couple of questions in. One is about how can we incorporate the objective of early intervention into our topic, which is children and young people in the criminal justice system. And the other is how to balance the rights, laws and possible realities.
Okay, so I was going to come in on these couple of questions. I think they're questions that are very specific in terms of creating the material for the sessions that that I think the author is thinking about here. And I think that my answer to that is that that's something to discuss with your co-professional author. And if you're feeling between you as a pair or as a threesome, however many of you are involved in a session, that you're getting stuck, that's what a sub-editor and ultimately the editorial team is for, to help give a little bit of guidance and nudging and advice about these kind of very specific questions. So I think that help and support is available for these kind of questions. And in my experience of writing, sometimes these are the sort of questions that come in the middle of a block of text where you know what you want to say about something, but there's something else where you're stuck. Well, stick it in and put it as a draft note to your drafting colleagues. If it's something that's blocking the creation of the material right from the start, then obviously that's something to address as soon as possible so that you can get writing, because that's one of the key tips that I want to give you as somebody who's also a writer in this process and has been a writer for the earlier parts of the program. Get your thoughts on paper, even if they look a bit messy, even if look as structured as you want them to look and so forth. You know, start creating, and then afterwards you can sculpt together.
Can I come in and add to those answers? Because I think there's some more general applications to them. The first question was, how can we incorporate the objective of early intervention into our topic? And I think the more general answer to that is that we really do want, as far as possible, to capitalize on the wealth of material that we already have in the core content curriculum. So either your professional author will already be familiar with the relevant areas of the core content curriculum, or between you and your professional author and editor or sub-editor, and if necessary, including me as lead editor, we can point you towards relevant core-minded sessions that you might want to look at, and then think, how can your material usefully be framed to lead into that? It doesn't have to repeat everything, but if the core-minded material is written in such a way that you actually don't think it's going to be right for parents, that's the point at which to be discussing amongst yourselves and with your sub-editor, how do we sculpt this particular early intervention learning objective for parents to give them an introduction, and where do we point them beyond this? What other resources, both on the web and written, are we aware of? Then turning to the, sorry, Raf wants to come back.
If I can just add to that, so an example of that would be if we're thinking very specifically about issues relating to the criminal justice system, it could be that someone would say, okay, we better point towards the sessions that relate to parent-child management and management of early behaviour problems, of which there are some sessions on the portal. We could point towards, for example, sessions on disorders that can be related to behavior problems, such as typical would be ADHD, and risk for use of substances and substance misuse. So, you know, that's just examples, I think, of what Brian Jacobs is referring to about bringing in and linking with existing material on the portal so that we maximize the kind of bang for our buck that we get from the creation of this material. And we don't have to recreate everything. We can point towards these things. Thank you. Over to Brian for the point about the second question that you had.
So the second question was how to balance rights, law, and possible reality. Now, this is something that I've become very aware of through the focus groups that I attended, and I went to 3 of them early on in this process, because a lot of parents have had what has felt to them rather poor experiences of working with professionals over the years, and my experience is that is usually cock-up. It's not that people are conspiring or being nasty deliberately. So the question is, how can you get your voice heard? Now, we are working in a sensitive framework here because we are government departments, they are funding us, and the advice that I've had from senior people is be diplomatic, but don't avoid some of the key issues. So there may be a bit of toing and froing amongst yourselves and with your sub-editors and with me about what sort of wording to use, but the concept of trying to make people recognize that they can stand up on behalf of their child and advocate for their child, as well as looking after themselves in this whole process, to me feel very, very important. And that's why we're creating 1 or 2 sessions here that has raised eyebrows locally, but actually I think are the right thing for us to do. They will help people. Finally, I just wanted to say one thing. This is particularly aimed, this is something aimed at professional authors as well as the parent authors, which is that we're going to be using, because of the word restrictions, we're going to be using a lot more bullet points and lists in terms of how we present things than one would ordinarily do in terms of e-learning, because we want to crystallize things, but we have to do it in very plain English. We need to remember that most people in the country read around a level of the Sun, the Daily Mirror. They don't read at the level of the Times and Telegraph, and we need to word things so that people don't feel demeaned in any way, but we're talking in straightforward English, which is actually at about a 12 to 13 age limit, and that's quite a skill to work to. Okay, I'll hand back to Emma. So there's a further question about, we were thinking of writing case vignettes. How many words should these be, and are they included in the draft content word count? So as I've already said, if we keep our draft content word count for a substantive session to 1,500 words, then that allows up to 500 words, which is effectively 4 minutes of spoken language, either used as video or as audio. I really would like people to restrict themselves to 1,500 of written words plus, if they want to use it, up to 500 words of audio-visual material. For the shorter sessions, I suspect that you're going to need to work to the 800-word limit, and then probably up to 2 minutes if you want of audio-visual material. I think if we work to those, then we will achieve what we want, both in terms of concentration and use to maximise the use that parents will make, and it will also enable the IDs to be able to achieve what they want as best they can within the budget that we have available.
Okay, we've got one more question, which is about the how do you check the reading age of the material that you're producing, and it's possible to do that in Word through the review tab, I think it is, but we can send out instructions on how you can do that, which should be a useful way of just checking as you're writing the kind of reading age level that you're writing to, and amending it if needed. Yes, Brian.
In previous versions of MindEd, in the previous material we've produced, quite a lot of my job actually was in fact helping people to reduce the age of what they'd written to, and the ways that I found to do it are try to reduce as far as possible ands and buts and subclauses, whilst, whether, where to, fors, etc. Try and keep the language straightforward and simple, so don't use long and complicated words if there's a simple way of putting it. It's not actually rocket science, but some people do find it quite difficult to do. A lot of us have been overtrained, but it is a very important thing because that's what enables communication. As Emma says, there is a tool within Word which we can let you have. If you're struggling with it, do come back to your sub-editor or to me directly, and I will try to help you.
Okay, we don't appear to have any more questions at the moment, so if I just ask our presenters whether there's anything they want to add at this stage before we tie it up.
Nothing from me.
Not from me, Emma, thank you.
Okay.
No, I don't think there's anything else from myself either, other than to thank those of you who have joined us today, and really look forward to taking the program forward together. We're very excited because we're treading on new territory, I think, here. Again, we've done that previously with the portal, and that's what we're doing here. So, be creative in how you want to present the material. We've given you some ideas and hints here, but your input is very welcome. As I'm saying this, there's one other little tip, which I think is in the author guide, but if you have existing material, you have access to existing audio or visual material, or you've seen something somewhere and you think, rather than trying to recreate it, can we pull that into the portal? Do tell us and let us know, because we can, look at, and obviously only with the appropriate permissions and licenses and so forth, but there are many things that people will grant for a portal like this which they may be a bit more precious about granting access to if it was, somewhere else. But because this is in the public arena and everybody can get to it and it's got a high profile and so forth, there's a lot of advantages for some people to have certain material on the portal, and they also feel very positively towards the vision that we have of making things better for children, people's mental health. So don't be frightened of thinking, oh, this might cost a lot of money. Well, if it does cost too much, we can't do it, but we may find that we can do it. So think about that too, and that can be cost efficient then, because we're not spending money on creating that material. Thank you.
Brian Jacobs, I just want to add my thanks to all the people who are being authors, both parents and professionals, because I know that many people lead very busy lives. This is a very exciting project, and my experience and that of the authors of the previous stages of MindEd is that everyone's actually ended up being really pleased with what's come out at the end. Because it really does look very professional and it brings their words to life. So good luck, everyone, in producing this material, and do please try to keep to time frames as much as possible. We're running a very tight time frame overall, and if you think there are going to be wobbles, please do let us know early. Don't be brave, because actually it could trip us up into really difficult territory. So, but if possible, please try to stick to time frames. Okay, thank you all very, very much for joining us.
Okay, just before we finish up, if anything occurs to you after the webinar and you have a question, or you've had a look in the author guide and you've got a question about that, please do get in touch. There's a list of contacts in the Appendix A in the author guide, which has email addresses and phone numbers for key people on the team. You should also have the email address for your sub-editor once you've submitted your session brief, so you can direct your question to whoever you feel is most appropriate, and we'll be more than happy to help you. As Brian said, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you over the next few months. Thank you, bye-bye.